I am here with my friend Richard. Hello, Richard.
Andy, very good to speak again.
Now, we are working through all sorts of topical issues. Let me just say this right at the beginning. If you've seen something in the media and you're thinking, what's the real story on this? I've got one I want to put to you because I think I know your response, but let's ask you. But if you've got a question, I will happily ask it to Richard. All you need to do is email me here, hello@pure247radio.org, hello@pure247radio.org. And my question, Richard, is one that I've seen and I keep seeing and thinking, come on, please. Have you heard of this? Earthing sheets.
Earthing sheet? No, that's a new one, Andy. Sorry.
So basically, the logic is this. You get a sheet, right? It's got wires running through it. You stick it into a plug socket and it lets you be earthed to the outside. It fixes varicose veins overnight. It corrects everything in your body. It feels to me a bit like, you know, in the Westerns where you see someone walking around with the fix-all bottle of tonic. It feels like one of those. Apart from what if it goes wrong and you die from electrocution, what are your thoughts on healing the body's many illnesses by plugging yourself into the soil?
Well, very interesting. I'd like to see evidence because one can claim anything, but where are the numbers? Where are the facts? Where's the science behind it? No, I mean, it's interesting. I'll tell you something, Andy. When I was a medical student, I did my medical elective in Nepal, and at that stage, this is now 40 years ago. At that stage, people were talking a lot about Eastern acupuncture and how it was claimed for all sorts of things. And I thought, well, okay. Anyway, I turn up and there's a man on the operating table because I was particularly interested in surgery, and he was having eye surgery under acupuncture, where a needle was put alongside his eye, deep into his brain, about 6 inches in this needle. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, that's interesting. He had eye surgery, no problem whatsoever. No other general anesthetic, no local anesthetic other than this acupuncture. So it taught me a lesson. Don't just think that Western medicine has all the answers, because clearly you can't have eye surgery without some sort of anesthetic. Acupuncture did the job. So that was a big lesson in life, I think. So I'm not here to poo-poo anything, but we do need some evidence. That's what I would say.
I saw an advert. I did not click on it because I don't do that on social media. Now I've been bombarded, and I must have paused as I was scrolling. So now I'm just bombarded by these things. I just think, but what if it goes wrong and the earth connects to the real cable and then you die?
I'll tell you something that comes to GPs at a sort of slightly more prosaic level, but homeopathy is obviously, there's lots of people who are very keen on homeopathy. And again, I've got nothing against it as long as it works. But what I did come across in the medical press was some people who relied on homeopathy, natural healing, if you like, for really serious conditions like life-threatening asthma, and died. And my view on it is it's absolutely fine for more minor stuff. But when you've got asthma that's going to kill you, you need to be ventilated, you need to be in hospital. At that point, I would say, okay, that's beyond homeopathy. You need to move into Western medicine. So I don't know about the earth. What's it called again? Earth?
I think it's an earthing sheet. I'll find one of the adverts or the website and I'll send it to you.
I would suspect it's along the same lines. Fine for minor stuff, not so good for the majors.
So I mean, the interesting what it is basically purporting to do is to remove all the excess electricity from your body, and that fixes all sort of stuff. So of course we do have electrical current. As a sufferer of palpitations, I understand there is real electricity in the body. However, I think I'm beyond the cynical of no thank you for me.
I'd like to know the science behind it. Why does it work, and how does it work, and what do the numbers say? Where are the trials? So yeah,
that's what I get. I'll find something and send it to you, because it's like that thing there, but smells can relax us, can't they? And that's a good thing. But if you've got a broken leg, a bit of jasmine is not going to make the bones fuse better. It might relax you, which hypothetically could then help you to rest better. But the direct healing, not so much.
I agree.
Right. Let's move on to what we're talking about this evening, sir.
Okay, so I mean, the big news in this last week or so in England, with far-reaching consequences, has been assisted suicide, which MPs, members of Parliament, for those who are in America, have voted in. Their numbers were approximately 55% for, 45% against. There were 55 more more MPs who voted for assisted suicide than voted against. And it's not the end of the story. It's the early days, but there's going to be some more debates, and then it has to pass through the House of Lords. But it is likely that assisted suicide will become law in the near future. Now, for those in England, there's been an awful lot in the press, still is every day. And I don't want to just rehash everything, but I wanted to look at assisted suicide from a medical point of view, which might be of interest to the listeners, and also from a Christian medical point of view. So that's where I'm going today. How will this bill affect doctors? How should Christian professionals respond to a bill that seems to go against biblical ethics? Remember, we pledge the Bible tells us, Exodus 20, 10 Commandments, do not murder. Let's not be squeamish. Assisted dying is actually assisted suicide. Suicide is self-murder. And it also goes against the Hippocratic Oath, which says the doctors first do no wrong. And by the way, further down the line also says, I will not poison my patients. When we're talking about lethal medicines, which doctors are prescribing. So how can we respond, and what can the listeners learn from this? So I just wanted to start really by reflecting on an interesting conversation that my wife Heather had with some of the lady doctors in our practice and in a neighbouring practice. She has a meal every couple of months or so with the girls, and they have a nice chat. And of course, they were chin wagging just before the assisted suicide vote came out. And all of them, there were 5 of them, 1 Christian, my wife, and 4 Muslims, all the other lady doctors, all said, we will not sign up to this, because it's against our religion. It's not just against Christianity, it's against all the major religions, Judaism, etc. We also have Buddhist and Hindu male doctors in our practice. I haven't talked to them specifically, but actually it's against their faiths as well. So that's very interesting. So if this comes in, well, we're not going to sign up. And of course, you need 3 doctors at law. The law says at present you need 3 doctors to be signatories. And then it's going to pass on to a judge who will make the final decision. Does this judge simply say, yes, that's what the doctors say? Or is the judge another viewpoint? Will he have to then go through all the issues? We don't know. But essentially, how can Christian doctors stand up against what I would view as an unholy legislation? Now, I might add, to start with, just to sort of muddy the waters a little bit, Andy, that this isn't the view of all doctors. Doctors have undoubtedly contributed to this change in the law. The British Medical Association, which is our union, had already changed its position in advance of this vote from being against assisted suicide to being neutral. So no party line on the subject. And if you Google assisted suicide, I always tell my patients, don't Google. So I Googled assisted suicide just for a little bit more information, because it's quite good on statistics. And it states that more doctors, 50%, are in favour than against, 39%. Well, that's not my finding, and it's certainly not my experience, but that's what Google says. So clearly there's a significant cohort of doctors who are for assisted suicide. So how do we go forward from here? And that's what I want to look at. Well, because I like statistics, I like numbers, another study says this: 90%, 9 out of 10 doctors say that assisted suicide will negatively impact their role as a doctor, their work. 90%, that's a lot. 84%, it's going to impact negatively their personal and family life. 79%, it's going to negatively impact doctors' mental health. 43% would resign if their workplace adopted assisted dying or assisted suicide. So that doesn't quite fit with doctors being more in support than not. Statistics can be misleading. But most doctors understand the idea, as the general public have been saying, that people want agency. They want to have control over their own bodies. But many are concerned, as in the newspapers, that introducing assisted dying will also negatively affect palliative care, which is already overstretched. You're going to put money into assisted suicide, which the government will have to do in terms of millions of pounds. That's millions of pounds that could have gone into palliative care and now isn't. Hospices already have to raise much of their own money. So that means palliative care is likely to take a hit. And one of the big pushes behind assisted suicide was because palliative care isn't good enough. Well, it's just about to get worse. That's not good news. So it's a bit of a mixed picture. So what am I suggesting? I don't like just being negative on things. I like to be positive. So as a Christian medic, what am I suggesting? Well, number one, let's campaign, all of us, whatever influence we have, for better palliative care. It's been said quite often that when patients are cared for properly at the end of their lives, hardly any express a wish to die. Many, in fact, want to remain alive as long as possible, make the most of their time left with family and friends. So, number one, let's campaign for better palliative care. Number two, let's preserve what we have, trust between doctors and patients. This is going to absolutely obliterate trust. Oh, doctor, are you looking after me? Or are you trying to kill me? These are conversations we're going to have. And I'm going to say, well, I'm telling you, I'm looking after you because I'm not going to kill you. I'm not signing up to this. But what about other doctors? How will they respond? You know, and especially when money comes in, which we'll come to later. Number three, morals matter. You know, quite honestly, we can look at the pros and cons, but assisted suicide from a Christian point of view, from a Muslim point of view, is quite simply wrong. You know, our lives are in God's hands. He gives, he takes away, and it's not for us to play God as mini gods. And linked to that, the Bible, of course, teaches us you must look after. It commands us, look after the vulnerable, the elderly, the disabled, because all lives matter. There is no Jew or Greek, male or female, slave or free. And we can extend that, able or disabled, all are equal in the eyes of God. That's the big picture. But there's also a few more things which I'll throw in before I hand back to Andy. We also want, we're concerned, aren't we, all of us, but medics as well, that assisted suicide will extend from terminal illness to non-terminal illness, as has already happened in many countries. Depression, autism, anorexia, even unhappy children. You know, if there's an opportunity to die when you're unhappy. And I've come across articles from people who would have pressed the button when they're unhappy, only to be delighted when their depression lifts, that they didn't. Yeah, but it would have been too late if they pressed the button, wouldn't they? So there we go. There's lots of things. And here's one of the things which I think is one of the biggest irony of all. Proponents of assisted suicide insist on their right to choose to deal with their bodies as they will, being mini gods. But the autonomy, the word he used here, is likely to decrease in this country because people, the elderly, the infirm, will feel a burden to die. They'll have less control over their own bodies, not more, especially when they may be encouraged by relatives. You know, your time's up. Motivated by saving money for the family, for the country. I'll tell you, Andy, I had a woman in church this week, just on Sunday, sadly, whose husband, Richard, had just died after a 2-year battle with Alzheimer's. And she said how glad she was that he died just before this bill came through, because otherwise she would have been under pressure from her family. How terrible is that? Fortunately, Richard knows the Lord. We know where he is. He's in a better place. But that's not the case with everybody. So, yeah, I think it's been a bad day for England, a bad day for the vulnerable, the elderly, and the infirm. And as Christian doctors, the battle's not over, and we need to stand firm, as in so many other areas of life. Over to you, my friend.
I do have a few thoughts, which I know you won't be surprised by. The first of which you actually said is you're sitting with a patient and they've come in with a swollen ankle. What's wrong with my ankle? Well, I'm going to prescribe this drug for you. Well, is that to help my ankle or is that to kill me? Was the very first thought I had.
Really?
Because as a non-medic, how do I know what that is? It's got a really long name. It means nothing to me. Well, is it really in the bottle? Is that really what you're going to give me? Is that tablet actually going to be killing me or helping me?
Thank you. Well, that's very helpful. Yes, you're quite right. I mean, you know, there's so much speak around medicine and names of drugs, absolutely, as there is in most professions. But medicine matters because it's about our bodies. And these are conversations we've had. I've had patients well in the distant past who've said, "Oh, doctor, could you help me along my way?" No, two reasons. Number one, I'm a doctor. We don't do that. Number two, I'm a Christian. We don't do that. But actually, if I'm a doctor, we don't do that. No longer applies. Wow. That somewhat weakens the argument. And if I was a doctor who wasn't a Christian or a Muslim, I might say, or another faith, I might be thinking, well, yeah, okay. When do you want to go? How terrible is that?
Another one that comes to my mind is we hear about soldiers who go to war, and one of the traumas they have, if they take somebody's life, is the kind of thing that lives with them. I know they don't want to talk about very much, but with those that do, will frequently say, I can never stop seeing what I did because I took another human being's life. But I just think, I mean, all the other stuff, there's enough of reasons against why this is complete insanity and madness. But what about the doctor's mental health when they have to say, I'm going to kill somebody? Because let's not mince words. Assisted suicide, which sounds all very lovely, assisted dying, is killing somebody.
Absolutely. And I quoted that statistic where 70% of doctors, even in advance of doing this, said this is going to affect my mental health. Yeah, you're quite right. There's going to be an impact on doctors. And if this extends to nurses and other people, be able to sign them, it's not impossible. My goodness, yeah, we've let the genie out of the bottle, and I've said many times, don't give the devil a foothold, and we've just given him one.
A very big one. We had Paul Huxley on recently talking about this from Christian Concern's perspective. And one of the things that I had not thought about, I'm curious what you think about that, is you said how at the moment there'll be 3 doctors, then it goes to a High Court judge, and it's all got to be signed off properly. But he referenced abortion, where only in the absolute most extreme situations will we ever consider this. And now it's almost seen. It isn't, but it's perceived as routine birth control. And he said the problem with this is we're going to have no High Court judges. They are already beyond swamps. We've got 3, 4, 5+ years of backlog, and all of a sudden it's going to come throwing out on this new stuff. And he said what will happen, as always happens, is we haven't got time yet. We'll sign it off.
You're absolutely right. Yes, abortion was brought in 1967 for extreme cases. Now, the last statistic I saw was that, and this applies in practice, 98.4% of all abortions are social abortions. It's inconvenient. And of course, this is what's going to happen with assisted suicide. You are inconvenient.
Yes.
Or people will feel I am inconvenient.
Yeah. Our friend, Dr. Trevor Stammers, we spoke on this same subject. He was quoting lots of what's happened in Canada, who have forged very, very far ahead with this. And you've got actual real-time quotes in papers of, well, we think you should consider suicide because you're very expensive to the state. And this is someone representing the state. Well, so it's where do you even go? This is wrong on so many levels. I'm not even sure where to begin saying why it's wrong, but I'm grateful for people like yourself, like Paul Huxley and Christian Concern, like Dr. Trevor Stanners, who can actually create. I look at it and think this is beyond insanity, and yet you're creating slightly more better arguments for it. But it's important.
Well, I'm bringing together stuff I've read as well as thought about. But I think what's interesting is, when we try to play God, God's given us rules. And boy, are they the best rules. Of course they are from God. When we create our own rules, what a mess. Well, literally, what a pig's dinner we make of things. We will, because we're flawed, fallible, frail, foolish. There's lots of F's, people. And this is the mess we make of things. Yeah, indeed.
Can we go into why this bill exists? Because I have a thought that I wanted to just expound a little bit, and I'd like your perspective as we try and bring this back to hope. But my thought is this: the people that are saying we want to be able to control our death, I think there's 2 parts of this. This is my own perspective, my own opinion. One is I don't want to suffer from pain. So if we have the ability to choose the moment in which we die, we can have bucket loads of painkillers, and therefore there's no problem. Just on this one alone, I think we already said before, I think you shared that people basically that doesn't happen. People don't die in pain.
It's very interesting. I remember listening to a palliative care expert on this recently on the TV. And this is the big thing that people are, they're equating death with inevitable, terrible pain. And he said, and this is a palliative care doctor with the experience of thousands of people, dying under his care, the numbers of people who suffer with pain badly at the end is less than 3%. So in other words, 3 out of 100, 97% of the cases, that's simply not the case, because our painkillers that we give do a good job. Where people are in pain, not everybody, of course, has pain at the end. It's not an inevitability. Alzheimer's, etc., doesn't mean you're going to be in pain. But those people who are in pain, there's only a tiny percentage where pain can't be controlled well with modern medicines. Modern medicines are very good.
And then the bit I wanted to talk to you about, because I think we've got to find some hope in the despair of let's kill everybody that's expensive or annoying, or, I don't like them and I'm a doctor, so I'm going to force this to them. Harold Shipman, I mean, that's classic doctor with abuse of power, who in 5 years' time would be applauded virtually for what he did. This is the stuff that really, scares me. But here's my thought.
Sad, there will be doctors who develop a taste for death. So there's a Swiss doctor who's produced these death pods, suicide. He's already known as Dr. Death in Switzerland. It doesn't seem to bother him. That would bother me. I know he knows Dr. Life, not Dr. Death. But there will be doctors who think, and of course make money out of it. This will become a business. How terrible.
So here's my thought. People who think we have the right to try and control our death. My perspective is this. They're doing that because of fear. It's not pain. It's not worry about burden. It's not a fear of money. For me, it's a worry about being able to control the end of their life, because all of us have this innate desire to have control. If we break a leg, we don't want to use a crutch, but we use a crutch. Why? Because we've got a broken leg. So we're going to take some support so we can control our lives. And what do people say when they become older, perhaps incontinent, which would be a classic sort of stereotype? Oh, I'm going to be a burden. And therefore, I want to be in control. I want to have dignity throughout my life. Here's my thought on this. We are born into this world, going back 50 years, the midwife slapping our backside. That's how we came into the world, kicking and screaming, covered in blood. And that's okay. That's part of the whole beauty of life, the whole birthing period, labor. It's very violent at one level, but it's what gives us life. We're not in control of that. And what I think is really going on here is it's got nothing to do with what we're hearing about, all this noise. Actually, I think it's much simpler. I think it's down to people who are afraid of eternity, of hell and heaven. It's the basic, simple, old-fashioned stuff of we want to be in control because then we have say over our body and we want that autonomy. And of course, with abortion, when we talk about autonomy all the time, it's women's rights. Yeah, well, the baby doesn't get a right because you've just killed it. You know, that's the reality of it. And I think it's exactly the same thing here. I genuinely want to know what you're thinking as a Christian medic and my friend. I think this has got less to do with what we're hearing about. And I think the real heart of this is just plain, simple, terrified fear at what they don't know.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, most people have this illusion that we can be in control at the end. We can't. We're not in control at the beginning, as you pointed out. We're not in control of lots of our lives, and we're not in control at the end. But if I can just control that. Now, when you become a Christian, you realize that number one, God is in control. He is sovereign, and he's in charge of everything. And whether we live to a 1 year, 30 years, or 100 years, ultimately what matters is what's our relationship with God like. And then when we put our trust in him, and this is what I've been saying to some of my patients this week. I remember a lady who's just fear was sort of oozing out of every pore of her body, and I was trying to say to her, listen, you need to give that like a rugby ball to God. Let him take it. He says, do not fear 365 times in the Bible, one for every day of the year. We know that because he knows how much we fear. But when we put our trust in him, then it takes away the fear throughout our life and at the end. And you're quite right. I think this control is a manifestation of fear, which in turn is a manifestation of lack of faith. Because, what is going to happen at the end of time? Well, and actually people think, well, if I can just control death, everything will be okay. No. You're still going to face God.
Yeah.
Everything is only okay when we put our trust in Jesus.
But we walk across the road, we get hit by a bus, we die. We don't control that. And the idea that we can control death, even that one, there's a massive irony. I'm going to control the moment at which I die. Probably actually you won't be. Somebody else will still have that control. Even the thing that you believe you're going to have in controlling your death, you're not in control of your death. Because if that doctor puts the plunge down, it doesn't work, you're not in control all of a sudden. And it goes wrong.
Yeah, sure. No, I think you're right there. You've hit the nail on the head with fear. That's what it's about. And of course, we know as Christians, I remember going to some wonderful talks on fear, which is that the great majority of our fears never take place. So people fearing, I'm going to die in terrible pain, that's less than 3%. It's actually quite unlikely. You aren't, but you're using this argument as a way of bringing assisted suicide into being. Well, actually, it's a false argument.
Mm-hmm. What's the antidote to fear, Richard? How do we bring this back to a place of hope and peace? I'm not in any way diminishing this because we need to stand against this assisted killing. Let's call it what it is. We can use fancy words like termination of a pregnancy. No, it's killing a child. It's killing a person. That's what it is. And we're seeing the same shift of wording to try and make it feel a little bit less harsh. So we don't say killing a child, we say abortion. All that's bad. Now it's termination and it's ending a pregnancy. Well, that pregnancy's got a name and it's a baby. It's the same thing here with what we're talking about with assisted suicide. What is the antidote real time for fear? I mean, we're talking about Christianity and a salvation, but what's the real time day-to-day antidote to fear?
Well, I've got a little plaque on my wall which says, be not afraid, only believe. And that's from Mark chapter 5, Jesus' statement. And actually, that is the antidote to fear, is faith. Because once we put our faith in God, then that should help us with our fears on this earth. I know that many Christians also have fear. I understand that. But actually, what we're meant to do is give our fears to the Lord. And then when we put our trust in him, we're not putting our trust in ourselves or our bodies or our doctors or, dying well as we might see it. But actually, we're saying to God, you're in charge. And I think that is the antidote. It is simple as that. We need to put our faith in Jesus, and then we leave the rest to him. That's not to say we shouldn't use medicines, shouldn't see doctors. Of course we could. God gives us brains, and medicine is absolutely part of his blessing on this earth. But actually, it's where we put our trust is. Don't put. I know when I had my bowel cancer, I didn't put my trust in doctors, and definitely didn't put it in myself, because my body's just let me down badly. I used what I could do, and I certainly used doctors and surgeons, thank you very much, and oncologists for healing me. But actually, all healing ultimately comes from God, and whether I live or die depends on him. And that's why I put my trust in God.
You made me think of one more thing. You said about the whole thing is about dying well, which is what this is purporting to try and do. But if we focus on dying well, there's a much, much more important thing, which is living well. And the only way to live well on this earth today is with peace and hope today for our futures, which means an ongoing active relationship with the Lord Jesus Christ. That is the only real antidote. In order to not have to worry about dying well, we need to live well.
To live well. And I think it was a revelation to me, but it's so obvious when we think about that. Eternal life isn't what happens when we die. It's now.
Yes.
God's interested. Yeah, someone said, didn't they? It's not just, a pie in the sky when you die. It's steak on the plate while you wait. It's now. God is interested in us now, right now. He doesn't want us. He doesn't intend us to be fearful, controlling beings, when actually fear is no good to us, and we haven't got the control anyway. We're putting our trust in things which are just a falsity, fake news, as Trump would say. This is no good. Whereas what's truth, what's solid, what's unchanging? God and his precepts, his principles, and his principles say, do not murder, do not take life, follow me.
Including not taking your own.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I remember actually talking to a Christian friend of mine the other day. He said, "Oh, suicide it's not murder." I said, well, it is, actually, isn't it? It's taking life. It's just your own, not somebody else's. And he struggled with that. I hope I made him think, because I'm sure that is correct. Unpalatable that might be. We need to call a spade a spade. The Bible certainly does.
Yeah, it doesn't mince around with stuff. I think we'd like to hope it would, but it's very, very clear on these things. And with assisted killing, I don't think I can bring myself to call it assisted dying, because that's buying into the lie that it's this nice, soft, squishy little thing. And it's really not. It's about the abrupt ending of a life before its due time. Because who knows, like you said, this is the one that really, really bothers me. If you're feeling low because you're depressed and you have a chemical imbalance in your brain, medicine can correct that. And you won't feel depressed and you won't feel down, because the medicine will help you and it will correct it. All of a sudden, all that depression has left you, like you said, and now you're filled with life and joy and hope. But if we're killing people because they're feeling bad, then that's just beyond stupid, because feelings change. I use this one, and it's not meant to be fickle, but it is true. I eat a big meal, I see a big dessert, I'm going to have a second piece because I feel like I want it, and then I feel sick afterwards because I've eaten too much food. That's just feeling hunger. That's just greed. This is much deeper, because this isn't about a meal or having to exercise for a few days. This is about someone's life, and life is precious.
It is precious. It is precious, and it's a bad day that this happened. Now I'm hoping, and I think this is where our listeners need to keep praying. This isn't the end of the story. There's still some work to be done, and we need to pray for the ins and outs of this. I think this probably will go forward, but let's mitigate against the damage done as much as we can through prayer. God's not finished yet.
Amen. He's not. And if you want hope, then you need to turn to Jesus. And if you're fearing the end of your life, you need to turn to Jesus. And if you're a Christian, you need to oppose this. I don't often say anything so definitive running a radio station. However, this is wrong and we should be opposed.
Amen.
Richard, thank you. We'll cover some other stuff next week. If you've got any thoughts on this, dare I ask this? If you've got any thoughts on assisted dying, killing, then you could email us and we can go back into this. If you've got other concerns, how do I know if my doctor is actually trying to kill me, is a question I never thought I'd have to have in the UK. It's now a real question. Is my doctor trying to kill me or save me? This is a real issue that doctors like yourself, you're going to have to face with people.
Correct. Sure. Thank you, Andy.
That's fine. If you've got questions, email us hello@pure247radio.org. Hello@pure247radio.org. I'll put your questions to Richard, any concerns or specific elements of this. And if you want to help people who want to stand against this, go and check out Christian Concern, send them some money, and they will try and get this stopped. There are many who are standing. That's just one because we've had them on the show recently. Richard, thank you.
Andy, thanks very much.
The Pure newsletter comes out once a month and is designed to build up, entertain and encourage you. Sign up for our newsletter at pure247radio.org.